staff changes to announce?
No. I really don't know why I'm up here, to be honest with you. We just finished yesterday, and we're in the process of getting some player evals done. So, nothing new.
Can you give us an update on Alex Smith? We haven't heard a whole lot about him, how he's doing, and just kind of how you might see the quarterback situation playing out this offseason. Yeah,
I haven't talked to Alex a few days. Texted with his wife once, but he's recovering. That's all I can say. I know it's going to be a long process for him, and we're obviously hopeful he can turn the corner and start the rehab process and possibly get back on the field. That's all we can hope for right now. In the meantime, we still have Colt, obviously, and Josh and Sanchez. Got a good look at those two guys. So that's where we're at.
Jay, in the secondary this year, obviously had a lot of young guys. Now DJ's gone. Guys like HaHa's a free agent. Some uncertainty there. When you look at a guy like Josh Norman, both in terms of his experience and his play, how important do you see him going forward, considering the uncertainty elsewhere in the secondary?
Yeah, we got to look at some young guys, which is good. Adonis got a little bit more yesterday, and obviously Stroman, Fabian, Danny Johnson all did some good things from time to time. Fabian is still a young developing player. Obviously Dunbar hurt us a little bit, but I talked to him today. He's recovering nicely from his leg. It looks like he's going to have total strength here pretty soon, back to his leg, so that's important. So it's a good young secondary. As for Josh, we have him for another year. He did some great things this year. Obviously, probably his numbers weren't where he wanted it to be, interception-wise or forced fumble-wise or what have you, but he's still a solid player for us and a great option.
What is the timetable for you over the next week? When do you meet with Dan? When do you the player evaluations, how long will that continue, and when do you do the staff evaluations? Yeah,
we're intending on doing player evaluations at the end of this week. Give them time to look at their guys and write some things up. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know. I just wait by the phone, and when I get the call, I go. So I don't know yet.
Jay, regardless of Alex, the future with Alex, did this year kind of change the way you look at whether you hold three quarterbacks kind of coming out of training camp and going into the season?
It could, yeah. Every year is different. Like I said before, the numbers are very thin, especially when you have injuries. Guys have 3-4 week injuries, and they're on your 53, but they're not playing, and those guys add up. So it's hard to keep a third quarterback just to sit around and hold a clipboard. But that would be a luxury we'd like to have. We've never really wanted to hold just two quarterbacks. We want to hold two quarterbacks, maybe one on the practice squad, but with all the injuries that we had, we were forced to bring practice squad linemen in. We were heavy on the offensive line on practice squad because we were light offensive line-wise. We're heavy wide receiver for obvious reasons. So in a perfect world, you'd like to have two on the active and one on the practice squad at least.
Back to the secondary with HaHa, you guys traded for him mid-season. It seemed like he took a little bit to acclimate to the system, but what did he bring to that room, and how could that affect the decision to potentially bring him back from leadership and other intangible standpoints?
Well, he's a quality person, number one, which is good. He's played a lot of football, so he knows what it takes to be a good football player and a good safety. So experience in that room is critical, with all the young guys. Josh is kind of a veteran now, I guess, but adding the safety with a voice like HaHa, people will listen, and his work ethic is outstanding. So from a leadership standpoint, he's top-notch, great kid. Love to have him back, but obviously he's a free agent, and we know how that works.
How would the need for that change with DJ no longer being a part of the equation?
How, what?
The leadership dynamic, how does that equation change with Swearinger?
You're always looking for great leaders, and DJ's one of those guys, or HaHa's one of those guys. He's a great leader, without a doubt. And he was, obviously probably wasn't quite as vocal as he would have been had he been here all year. Since he just got here, he was feeling his way with the guys, but as he got more acclimated with the players in the system, you could see him starting to branch off a little bit, and is more of a positive energy that he brings to the group, which is good.
And just one more thing in that groom, Monte, is there any update on him and where he stands with this franchise?
No update right now.
Jay, is there any update on Reuben Foster? Anything you guys have heard from the league? We see the nameplate and stuff like that in the locker room. Any update there?
Yeah, no update on Reuben at all.
Hi, Coach. I was wondering if you, when you look over this season, if there was a high point or a positive memory, and maybe what is the worst memory you take from this season?
I think the positive memory, I think getting to know each individual player, I think is always fun. You know, as a coach, you get to know these guys and what makes them tick. And got a lot of good young guys, some veteran guys. The leadership that they possessed was great to watch, and watch some guys develop throughout the course of the season. Being able to coach a guy like Adrian Peterson, a Hall of Fame type guy, was actually one of the high points in my career personally. You know, there's a lot of things to go back and look at from each individual player, what they did well, how they developed as players and as people, which is kind of fun to watch. Low point, obviously, when you're done, the season's over, that's always a low point. But the injuries, you know, to Alex obviously was a major low point. Brandon Sheriff, all the injuries in general were bad. I'm not going to say one's worse than the other. They all hurt us. But when you lose two quarterbacks, you know, Alex number one, and then Colt when he was ready for his finally get his opportunity to show what he had, and he snaps his leg. So I'd say for sure that was a low point.
Jay, we talked to Zach Brown earlier. He's, you know, like a lot of guys, just not sure what the future holds for him. When you look at the inside linebacker in general, do you think you guys have enough based on what you have on this roster, or is this one of the positions that could be a sort of a high need position going into the offseason?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have to evaluate that again. You know, I think Sean Dion did some good things. I like the way he developed as a player. He started playing more first and second down. Zach Brown played more sub defense, his ability to run. So it's not like we're totally down on Zach Brown. You know, he missed a little bit of time here and there in OTAs and training camp with his oblique, and just opened the door for Sean Dion to get more and more reps, and we liked what we saw, so he played more and more. Josh Harvey Clemens obviously has a role in the dime packages. He can run and cover backs and tight ends. You know, Zach Vigil does some good things on special teams. Obviously, Mason Foster, I think, led our team in tackles this year. So there's people in that room that are good, but you're always looking to improve your team.
Jay, can you see a scenario next year where you have Adrian Peterson, Darius Geis, and Chris Thompson all? Like, can you use all three of them, or could they all be a factor?
Yeah, you could do that for sure. That wouldn't be a bad thing to have. You still have Byron Marshall too, and Samaje Perine. So I think the stable of backs are very interesting here. Once everybody's healthy, and love to see Adrian come back. You know, full bill of health. You know, he was banged up all the second half of the season, the entire second half of the season, and he played through it and still played pretty good. So that's something we'll have to talk about. Obviously, Adrian's a free agent, and he's probably going to look at his options also, but all good players.
Good follow-up on injury stuff with Sheriff. How long-term is that injury? I know you've had some guys with that before. It happened mid-season. Is he ready to go?
Yeah, Sheriff will be ready quicker than anybody probably in the history of that injury, so I'm not even concerned about Brandon. He's already probably doing push-ups, a weirdo, but he'll be fine. I don't have the exact timetable though for you.
What did you obviously a Pro Bowler, what did you miss when he went out of the lineup, and how did you try to make up for
what
his
do you
loss?
miss when you lose a Pro Bowler at guard? Well, you miss a lot. You miss a lot in the running game for sure. The pass protection is key. The screen game suffered drastically with him out of the game because he's one of the best guys out in space there is in the National Football League as far as a guard's concerned. Leadership, his work ethic, his tenacity. You just can't put one word on what you miss when you lose a guy like Brandon Sheriff. It's an entire package of the player in person.
Obviously, injuries took a big toll on your offense and the team in general. But when you look back at the season, how do you make sure that you don't just view it under those terms, that you look at everything and not just injuries? Is that an easy thing to do, a hard thing to do? And
it's impossible, really. You know, it's hard because you're talking about really, really good players that didn't play, especially at the quarterback position. How do you evaluate your team when your two starting quarterbacks that you worked the entire season with are out? Nothing against Josh or Mark. You know, they came in the best they could, but they didn't have the luxury of having OTA practices and meetings and training camp practices and meetings and preseason games. I mean, it's a big deal for a quarterback. You need the reps. And then offensive line-wise, I mean, it's hard to say what we would have been with Brandon Sheriff at right guard and Sean Laval or Jonathan Cooper or Ari Kwanjo or Catalina, or whoever, all these guys that went down. It's difficult. Or Paul Richardson full-time at receiver with the speed that he has, or Jameson Crowder all year, or Chris Thompson all year, or Jordan Reed all year. We just never got everybody together all at once, so it's hard to really say this is where we are because we don't really know how good we can be with everybody in the lineup at the same time.
Jay, what did you think of Preston Smith's year and thoughts on his return?
Yeah, he's a free agent for sure. I had a nice talk with him today, and I think we obviously welcome him back, but he is, like I said, he's earned the right to test the market out a little bit. Hopefully we can get something done for him. I think he's still a young, developing player. I think, if we're fortunate enough to get him back, I think there's ways to utilize him a little bit more. I think he can play more spots than just outside back or defensive end. I think he can play inside, over the center, and do some different things in the pass rush that we haven't really asked him to do yet. So I still think his future is very bright in the National Football League. He's young, he's strong, he's long, he's smart. Obviously from a production standpoint, I think he only had 4 sacks this year. That's low for a guy like that. I think he'll get more and more the more he plays.
Last year, you guys had a lot of injuries, and you kind of did a little self-examination and came up with the recovery room and some other things. Yeah. Do you guys intend to do another self-scout there and try to figure out, what's going on? Because it's kind of ridiculous.
It's really hard. Everybody's pointing their finger at the training staff or the strength staff. We got the best strength staff in football, and I feel really good about them. And the training staff, they just trying to manage injuries and try to get people back on the field as quick as they can. They have nothing to do with a blown out knee or a torn pec or a pulled hamstring or an oblique or a foot or a toe we had every body part covered this year, and it's nobody's fault, but we'll do our due diligence and try to figure out why it's happening to us 2 years in a row. But with the amount of different types of injuries, I really don't think there will be a reason. I think it's just bad luck. They land funny, they get something torn or broken, and that's pro football.
Jay, over the last 24 hours, there's been a lot of head coaches who've been relieved of their duties. That you're standing here talking to us. I'm taking that as a positive for you. Have you had any conversations yet? And if not, when do you anticipate having any with the front office or ownership about your future and what you see for this team going forward?
Yeah, I haven't had any talks yet. I have no idea when they will take place, but I know they will take place. So I got to wait and just kind of see what happens. But it's a tough business. A lot of good coaches have been let go already, and there'll be a lot more, I'm sure, here in the next couple days or weeks, what have you. So moving forward, if I am fortunate enough to be here, I feel really good about the nucleus of players that we have. We do have to adjust some things, without a doubt. When you're 7-9, whether you have injuries or not, it's not good enough for this franchise. I know Mr. Snyder demands greatness from his staff and his players, and we didn't deliver this year. So we have to figure out ways to get better from a coaching staff standpoint first, and then from a player standpoint.
What's the one thing that you would, in that subsequent meeting, you would want to emphasize that you think needs to change going forward?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. There's a lot of things that probably need to change, but I think just moving forward, we just got to be all on the same page as far as personnel, coaching, and all that stuff. But we have a good communication system, a good system in place right now. But with all the injuries that we've had, it's just hard to gauge. Is this guy? Would we have been better with this guy in here and all our healthy guys? It's just hard to gauge. We adjusted pretty well, I thought, as a staff and tried to get as many guys ready to play as we could. Some young guys off the streets on a Tuesday that started on a Sunday in the National Football League is not easy to do. So I think staff-wise we did some good things, obviously, but not good enough. So that evaluation process, I'll have to do a lot of listening first if I'm still here, see what they see, their vision is, and then I have to adapt to what they see and try to do the best I can to make it work.
Jay, when people start looking at your cap situation and guys that could be released potentially, create some space, Jordan Reed's name is probably going to come up. I know also how fondly you think of him as a player and what he means to this offense. Can you try to put into perspective exactly what he means to this football team and what you think of him still as a player at this point in his career?
Yeah, I like Jordan a lot. I think he's an excellent player. He's a difference maker on offense. Tight ends that can win in zone and man coverage are hard to find. When you get that matchup, it's very easy for a quarterback to find, really. The passes don't have to be 35 yards down the field. They can be 8 to 10 yards, intermediate type passes that he can run after the catch. His blocking has improved, and it's going to continue to get better the stronger he gets. We just got to get him healthy. But he is a dynamic player, great athlete, works extremely hard. He's a great kid, never late. And he's a big part of this success of this football team moving forward, in my opinion.
How important would it be to have Jameson Crowder back, and what's kind of the status there now that he's going to be a free agent.
Yeah, Jamin's a lot like Preston. Very young player, developing. His best years are in front of him, without a doubt. I feel the same way about Preston. I think they're going to explode on the scene here very shortly. He's got great quickness in intermediate routes and can separate. He's got good hands. He's tough. He's physical in the running game. There's really not anything that Jameson can't do. You look at his size, you say he's little, but he plays big. So, we got to try to get him back for sure.
So you mentioned the communication between front office, coaching staff. You guys all have to get on the same page. Do you feel like with everybody in their current role that is possible, or that there needs to at least be some reshuffling?
It starts with, once I get the word, I got to pass it along. We got to do a better job of executing the plan, and we've tried to do that. We just have not done a very good job, obviously, 7-9 in the last 2 years. So we understand what we have to do to improve. We just got to do a good job of, like I said, of executing the plan.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.